Environmental Sensing in the City, Part 4 of 5 based on McCullough 2013, the first part of the book Ambient Commons. McCullough's next chapter discusses embodiment. Specifically, this chapter expands on the notion of embodied cognition, that cognition uses external circumstances much like knowledge representations. Cognitive scientists have backed away from the computational models of the mind they once relied on in favor of a new view of cognition as making active embodied use of external contexts. Hence, you aren't your brain. This figure shows the older model at the top and the newer model below it. The older model is the squared off sequence at the top, and the newer model is the circular sequence below. I'll zoom in on each of them in a second. When you look at the whole thing, it's easy to notice that the older model resides more on the disembodied side of the embodiment divide than does the newer model. Now let's take a look at the two models more closely. First, the older model, which is representational. What happens outside the mind is just sensory perception and deliberated action. The disembodied side is where the mind's action is. Rules, models, and frameworks are stored and used there. The newer model, by contrast, has most of the action on the embodied side. Only practiced knowledge lies purely in the disembodied mind. That puts practice into the limelight, and if you have any skill that requires daily practice, that will probably appeal to you. The rest of the model relies on tools, props, and external configurations. Perception is ongoing, with cognitive production using found cues. McCullough turns to activity theory to help explain embodied cognition. Activity theory describes a continual rebalancing of internal and external knowledge representations. Internalization happens when you learn, for example, by watching someone, internalizing the physical props and social cues that you see. Externalization happens when acquired internal processes resort to tools under new circumstances, for example, when you use a calculator to scale up your arithmetic. Casual discovery of useful circumstances depends on a cultivated situational awareness that differs from instructed use of designed and declared means. A famous experiment, which is illustrated here on stair climbing, brought out the point that affordances exist whether they're designed or not, and are perceived directly without mediation in relationship to intent. So in this experiment, stacked boxes substituted for stairs, and they were perceived as climbable depending on the leg length of the participants. And so affordance is an actor-environment relationship that is not necessarily designed and not necessarily declared. McCullough says that the more enduring the environment, the more it shapes expectations without saturating attention. And he goes on to say that regular exposure reduces the distractions of unneeded stimuli. Habituation to contexts helps mastery develop. Returning to McCullough's picture of representation versus embodied models of cognition, we see here two paths in processing time, perceptual on the left and representational on the right. The left-hand path is faster and less burdened by deliberative processing. The right-hand path follows the older representational model of cognition more closely. McCullough asserts that activity theory refers to the left-hand path as pre-ontological, and here ontology means categorical schemas that characterize knowledge representation. He posits a concept that he coined, runaway ontology, as the dangerous side of knowledge representation, where too much emphasis on categorical schemas slows processing and stifles the pre-ontological. Soldiers and surgeons cultivate a quality called situational awareness. Instead of playing by the rules, an expert plays the situation. Tacit knowledge embodies the concept that to use the environment as an active resource means that skills can neither be acquired, nor applied, nor even explained without the environment. Tools in the environment not only put you in a frame of mind for enacting a skill, but are needed to create that frame of mind in the first place. There's a theory called flow, most often used to explain creativity, but that can be applied here. The state of flow occurs when you're working and are almost effortlessly involved in your work. You're succeeding in what you're doing, and you don't need to step away from it. You can meet great demands without feeling an increase in effort. Purposeful engagement and persistent context are prerequisites for flow, or for effortless attention, as McCullough recasts it. So he uses this expression, effortless attention. And the experience of effortless attention is that the activity provides the impetus for action, involving a bunch of things, involving a challenging activity that requires skill, involving the merging of action and awareness, involving clear goals and immediate feedback, involving concentration on the task at hand, involving a feeling of being in control, involving a loss of self-consciousness, and involving an altered sense of time. Embodied information informs through the intrinsic structure of situations, but the mediation that is usually meant by information appears more and more in the embodied contexts of everyday life. For example, on the left is a smoke ring from an actual volcano, Mount Etna. On the right are smoke rings from a waste-to-energy processing plant whose frequency, the frequency of the smoke rings, that is, indicate how much waste is being processed. Finally, here is McCullough's summary of Chapter 4, Embodiment. The main idea, embodied cognition. The counter-argument, representational theories of mind. The key terms, and they're sort of juxtaposed, pre-ontological and runaway ontology. What has changed is the cognitive science of engagement, and the catalyst are important problems in society of de-skilling and distraction. The related field, activity theory, which underlies most of this chapter. And the open debate is on tacit knowledge, which everyone agrees exists, but various experts disagree about the details. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 4. And thank you for your attention, and I look forward to Chapter 5.